What's up, guys? It is IRGT85. Happy Friday, but you know the drill by now. We got some video game news to talk about. We have some very hot stories that I want to cover today, so if this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like and share the video as well. But without any further ado, let's talk about what's going on in the world of video games, and we're going to start things off with a brand new acquisition done by Sony. Now, it's kind of interesting because it seems like this console generation we've been hearing about Microsoft wanting to purchase studios, whereas Sony has just been going out there and doing it. They've acquired quite a few studios this year for the PlayStation brand, and it looks like they have just acquired another one, and really this studio shouldn't come as a huge surprise to anyone, as the studio in question is Bluepoint Games. Now, Bluepoint Games is definitely a company that I have assimilated with PlayStation ever since their rise to prominence. They of course did things like the Uncharted Nathan Drake collection on the PlayStation 4. Their most recent title was Demon's Souls Remake on PlayStation 5, so this shouldn't come as a huge surprise to anyone. This is obviously a very talented company who's able to do a lot of different things, but I'll be interested to see them working on brand new games. Most of their stuff that they've done so far have been remasters or remakes of games that have already released, and they seem to have that sort of locked down. There of course were rumors of Bluepoint working on a Metal Gear Solid remake, but it seems like that might not necessarily be the case if Sony is saying that this company will be working on something brand new. Obviously that would be yet another remake. So either way, I'm interested to see what Bluepoint does. They obviously are masters of the PlayStation hardware, whether we're talking about the PlayStation 4 or the PlayStation 5. Demon's Souls was a fantastic looking game. I just absolutely suck at Souls games, so I can never really get super into it. But this is yet another acquisition for Sony this year, and they're bolstering up their lineup of companies to make games for them, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out going forward. Obviously, they're working with companies they are already familiar with for the most part, so it's a good partnership. You know, Bluepoint and Sony, it's kind of like peanut butter and jelly, which I've never actually had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but you kind of assimilate one with the other. So good move for Sony. I'm interested to see what Bluepoint Games does next and who Sony ends up buying next, because obviously it seems like they're not done anytime soon, and they're acquiring more and more studios to make more and more PlayStation games. Next up, a couple weeks ago on the channel, we talked about something that I was very interested in. That is Grand Theft Auto, the Trilogy, the Definitive Edition that was allegedly coming out sometime in 2021, comprising of the original Grand Theft Auto 3, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and of course, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Three excellent games, three games that I feel just have infinite replay value, even though they're PlayStation 2 games, so yes, they are a bit dated, but just fantastic games. And it seemed like this compilation was going to be releasing sometime in 2021 for all modern platforms, the PlayStation platforms, Xbox, and the Nintendo Switch, also on PC and mobile devices. Well, it's been kind of quiet since that was initially first talked about. I honestly thought that if this was going to be something that releases this year, I thought we would potentially see it at the latest Nintendo Direct that we had, because that would have been a really cool announcement. But of course that event came and went, and there was no Grand Theft Auto Trilogy. So what's up with it? Has there been any news on it? Well, yesterday actually there was a new discovery made by Nibel over on Twitter. I've talked about him a million times before. I'll have a link to his Twitter account in the description box down below. But the Korean ratings board, the South Korean ratings board, actually just rated on September 30th of 2021 Grand Theft Auto the Trilogy, the Definitive Edition. Now, the South Korean ratings board has actually been very busy lately. They've been leaking games left and right. You might remember the Castlevania Advance collection that we've talked about on the channel before, consisting of all the Game Boy Advance Castlevania games. I did a video on that. Make sure you guys go check out my review and thoughts on that game, but that was actually leaked from the Korean ratings board as well. So it looks like this is yet another instance of a game being leaked after being heavily rumored by the South Korean's ratings board. Now, Kotaku, who initially talked about this a few weeks ago, actually has updated and said that they still anticipate this game will be releasing in 2021. Initially, they had heard that the game could be pushed back until 2022. Now it seems like what Rockstar is doing is focusing on the console editions of this game and them not worrying so much about the mobile and PC. It seems like those versions of the game will come out sometime in 2022, and the latest that they have heard as of yesterday was that this game is on schedule to release in November of 2021. And honestly, it kind of makes sense if you think about it, because what does Rockstar have this holiday season? Of course, their big thing that they were supposedly going to be doing was the Grand Theft Auto 5 for next generation platforms for the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, but they delayed that until March of 2022 So now what do they have this holiday season? It's not like Rockstar makes any other games anymore, you know, remember like Bully and stuff like that? I'd love a new Bully, but hey, I guess we're not getting that. We're getting more Grand Theft Auto. So if this does indeed come out in November, we're probably going to hear about it any time now. You feel like Rockstar would want to hype this up and showcase this game running on a variety of platforms. And yes, it does seem like this game is going to be digital only at first. I'm sure they'll make a physical edition down the road. Like, that seems to be kind of the norm now. Like, you release a digital edition and then follow it up with the physical edition, which I think sucks ass. Just do it all at once. Like, what's the problem here? Spend a little extra money. Are you worried that Grand Theft Auto isn't going to sell? Because I mean, it tends to sell, you know, they're kind of some of the best selling games of all time, and when you release them across a variety of platforms, people will end up buying this. But obviously I have my eyes on the Nintendo Switch version of these games. This is the perfect sort of game to play on the go, and I'm really curious to see just how much work they've put into this. There's been some rumors about how much work are being put into these games, remodeled assets, remodeled textures, and you know, just looking like some of these upgrades that we've seen, sort of the unofficial upgrades that fans do with these games running on the PC. So it'll be cool to see. You know, I'm definitely looking forward to this. I think where there's smoke, there's fire. Obviously, if the Koreans rating board has already rated this game, something will be coming sooner rather than later, and I hope it does release this year because I think it would just be kick-ass to play these games again. And finally, yesterday we had a very spicy story involving Bloomberg and the Nintendo Switch Pro, the fabled Nintendo Switch Pro, with Bloomberg essentially coming out and saying that 11 different developers had a 4K Nintendo Switch development kit, but they were making games for a system that doesn't exist because for whatever reason, Nintendo did not release the 4K Nintendo Switch this year. They might be releasing it next year. There was a lot of stuff going on with this. Obviously, some of the stuff attributed to it was a semiconductor shortage because of what's going on with the chip side of things in the world, and it was a bunch of stuff. Make sure you guys check out that video to sort of dive into the in-depth stuff and sort of see my thoughts on the original Bloomberg article. Nintendo actually came back and said, no, piss off, there is no 4K Switch. So it was a very spicy thing. But there was one thing in that Bloomberg article that definitely stood out to me, and is something that we talked about, is that of the 11 developers that were mentioned in the article, one of them was actually named, and that was Zynga. Now, Zynga is a company that focuses mostly on mobile games, of course, but they are working on an upcoming Nintendo Switch game with Star Wars Hunters. So Zynga was actually contacted about this as they were the only company named, and Zynga actually gave a statement on the 4K Nintendo Switch and said the following. As a Switch developer for the upcoming Star Wars Hunters game that Zynga announced on a recent Nintendo Direct, we can confirm that none of the development kits Zynga has or is in receipt of are 4K developer kits. So obviously this sort of puts a monkey wrench into everything because you named one company Bloomberg, and that company was of course Zynga. And now Zynga was asked about this and they said no, they don't have a 4K development kit for the Nintendo Switch. But much like yesterday's stuff, there are two layers to the story. Now on the surface level, you could just take it at face value. Zynga does not have a 4K Nintendo development kit for the Nintendo Switch. They're not working on a 4K game. They never had a 4K development kit for the system, and Bloomberg is just talking out their ass. Or you could look at it another way and say that, well, maybe Zynga is under an NDA. You know, when you get these development kits, you're not supposed to talk about them. You're not supposed to showcase them. That is information just for you. So is it PR based stuff? Is it just sort of business as usual where you have to say you don't have it? Or like, what's the situation with that? It's kind of scummy because I feel like Bloomberg put Zynga in a position where they pretty much had to say something, as they were the only company named out of 11 companies. It's like, why do you respect the privacy of these other 10 companies but not the privacy of Zynga? Obviously they're going to be harassed about this. Obviously people are going to be asking them questions about this. Now a lot of people are online are sort of reading between the lines with this and saying, well, the wording on this makes it seem like Nintendo could still be doing it, so on and so forth. But it's just like, you know, as more and more time goes on, it makes less and less sense to do a Nintendo Switch Pro or a Nintendo Switch revision and not just do a Nintendo Switch 2. I definitely think Nintendo will keep the hybrid system model. I definitely think that all of the games that you play on your current Nintendo Switch will play on the next Nintendo Switch. So what would be the reason, you know, 5, 6, 7 years potentially later after releasing the system to release a Pro version of the system unless you're doing it as a successor, not just a revision? You know, you have to factor in things like that to where from a business perspective, you know, it wouldn't make sense to just do a simple upgrade of the Switch. You would probably want to do something more substantial. It's a really fun situation. It's really weird, and I know people are just sick and tired of hearing about the Nintendo Switch Pro, because I personally am, as someone who's talked about it a million times and was so adamant that it was coming out this year. I do feel like Nintendo probably did have this system in mind. I do feel like that it was probably going to be what the Nintendo Switch OLED ended up being this year, as potentially releasing this year. I think Nintendo just didn't have the chips for it, and now they're sort of in a predicament where it's like, well, do we wait? You know, do we do this in 2023, 2024, or do we just scrap it and go for a successor? It's not like the Nintendo Switch is struggling to sell or anything like that, but I wanted to bring that to your guys' attention because I know yesterday's video was a very hot topic, and Zynga pretty much coming out and saying something about it, I think just adds another, you know, little bit more fuel to the fire about this whole situation. So was Bloomberg lying about all of this? Alrighty, so that is going to do it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to let me know what you think of everything in the comments section down below. Are you surprised that Bluepoint was purchased by Sony? Because, well, I'm not. Are you surprised that Grand Theft Auto Trilogy Definitive Edition could be coming out this year? Because, well, I'm not. And are you surprised that Bloomberg could have been lying about this whole situation and that Zynga came out and said that, hey, we don't have this 4K kit? Because, well, I'm not. And as always, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like and share the video as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.